I used to think that I would just do anything for money. And so and with hindsight and with age, you kind of go back and you think you're pretty stupid. But at the time, I thought my passion was money. I thought those two things, I thought it was okay to be passionate about just making money. And, I looked up to the partners who, the most successful partners in law firms those days made between 1 to 1.5 million a year. And I was like, I want to be that. I want to do that. Why? Because I want 1 to 1.5 million a year. That's it. And in many ways, you're often taught to be like that. You're kind of conditioned to be like that.
Tim Washington is a former corporate lawyer, ex-textile manufacturer, family man, now the future for Australia's clean vehicle industry, and our latest guest on the It's Never About Money podcast. Tim's career has taken many turns, but the most important of all was his switch from chasing money to chasing his passion. And all it took was working with his mum in the family business. You'll want to hear this story. Enjoy episode 16 with Tim Washington. So, Tim, look, thanks for coming on. Very much appreciated. How are you doing with the state of play at the moment? We're just being released. The shackles have been released. How are you feeling about things at the moment?
I'm feeling really positive, Joe, and thanks for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be speaking with you. I think in many ways for me, because my life revolves around work and family, nothing much has changed for me. COVID actually brought a lot of heartache to the world, but brought very positive things to our family. And it kind of, I always get strange looks when I say this, but I actually feel quite happy about the opportunity to reconnect with my family and with my son. I've got a 4.5-year-old, and during COVID, it really allowed me to reconnect with him. And because I was working from home the whole time rather than kind of going into the office. And it's changed my relationship with my son in particular. And so I was actually really kind of happy about that. Not happy about COVID in general, but just happy about some of the kind of unforeseen opportunities that it brought. With the recent lockdowns, these days, you just think about how good it is to be able to still carry on working from home. I think people don't realize that only 10 years ago, this wouldn't have been possible.
We're doing a podcast via Zoom.
Yeah, that's right.
It's crazy.
Yeah, that's right. So I kind of just go, think about 10 years ago, if COVID hit, the economy would have gone absolutely crazy because nobody would have been actually be able to do any work. It's because of technology that we've been able to even have some semblance of an economy during a global pandemic. Otherwise, everything would have shut down. People would have lost their jobs. Governments would have had to spend even more money. But because we have the internet and because we have tools to work from home, that didn't happen. So in many ways, I feel lucky that it hit when it hit. So.
Yeah, and notwithstanding the fact that as you mentioned, there is some suffering out there, and different people have different circumstances. When you actually hear what you're saying with respect to what COVID has provided you in terms of an opportunity for reconnection with your family, I actually think you can draw a parallel between that sort of optimistic and positive mindset of taking adversity and making it a strength or a positive, and actually see that in the most successful business owners tend to do that. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being positive is just underrated as a thing. I do. Some people tend to be turn these things into courses and into, books and stuff like that. But the reality is just, you face so many issues during any working day, whether it be kind of work, family, friends, kind of politics or whatever. And you do tend to focus on the negatives. I'm a fairly conservative person when I'm making business decisions. I do look at worst case outcomes, worst case scenarios. But that doesn't mean you can't be positive. So we always celebrate the little wins. We always kind of pump ourselves up for things that are almost inconsequential. Like sometimes, in business, you get these little victories that have almost no effect on your balance sheet, but you still want to give yourself permission to be happy about it.
Yes.
And it seems so weird because like everyone focuses on negatives. And so therefore it always feels like sometimes you just have to say, I'm allowed to be happy about that. Like I am allowed to be positive about that. And so I don't kind of subscribe to any like formal philosophy or anything. I just try and focus on the positives because otherwise you're just going to go crazy.
Yeah, for sure. Now, we can clearly see there's a fair bit of wisdom that's already coming from you. And now that really belies your very young age. And the fact that, Tim, you've had 3 different careers and effectively. So, I really want you to run off and explain to us and take us on a bit of a journey into that sort of, career progression, because it's quite fascinating.
Yeah, sure. I don't feel very young, Joe. But thank you. I do appreciate that. Yeah, so look, I wanted to be a lawyer for as long as I remember, and that's mostly because growing up kind of in primary school and then in high school, there was like this spate of like really popular legal shows on TV. Like Ally McBeal and The Practice and Law and Order. I just grew up on those shows. I'm like, man, I really love seeing those lawyers in court cases, pull out miraculous wins in 40 minutes.
I'm glad you didn't say Perry Mason, because that would have
I never watched that. Really loved Ally McBeal, actually. I thought that seemed like a really fun workplace. And, kind of spoiler alert, legal firms are not like that. But yeah, I wanted to get into the law, and I was very heavily involved in debating during school and uni, and I just thought that was my future. And I didn't work hard enough during high school to get into law, because I was just a geek and I played too many computer games, and I just did not get the scores. So I went into commerce and eventually transfer my way into law. And I really loved law for the philosophy behind it, for the kind of like thinking behind it. And I always thought, I'd be a barrister, I'll kind of do constitutional law and stuff like that. I really loved law. But then I just chased money. Like I was pretty good at contracts and I just chased money and I just went into a corporate law firm. There's nothing wrong with that, but what's really interesting for me, Joe, is that when you're a law student, I was at University of Melbourne, it was just a done thing. You apply for clerkships at major law firms. And there was no encouragement of doing anything else, really. Like if you wanted to do criminal law or constitutional law or family law or international law, yeah, there were subjects, there were courses. But when it came to clerkship time, everybody just applied to the corporate law firms. Mm-hmm. And looking back, I actually think that's really weird. For a diverse syllabus, you push everyone in the one direction. And you have these people who are not interested in private law in the least applying because of the corporate law firm's pro bono programs. And I'm like...
Commercial reality.
Yeah. And I've just gone... And it was the first time that I think you split your passion from your career. And you see that split. Because I had lots of friends because I had lots of friends who were doing law who couldn't give a shit about sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to swear, but I do tend to swear a bit.
That's okay. Haven't thought about it.
But couldn't care less about the corporate side, justifying to themselves why they should join a corporate law firm. And a lot of them did so because they did good pro bono work. And you kind of see that kind of weird conflict in their eyes when they apply for these, and they're very talented people. So anyway, I chased the money and I went and did that corporate law side, and I joined a corporate law firm, and I quite enjoyed it, really. It was not the most exciting work in the world, but I quite enjoyed it, and I had a really good partner, and it was good.
But did you ever feel that chasm internally that you were talking about, that sort of disconnect between what you actually, might be passionate about and what you were actually doing?
Not at the time.
No.
Not at the time. I was a very arrogant young kid. And I used to think that I would just do anything for money. And so and with hindsight and with age, you kind of go back and you think you're pretty stupid. But at the time, I thought my passion was money. Like, I thought those two things, like, I thought it was okay to be passionate about just making money. Like, and, I looked up to the partners who, the most successful partners in law firms those days made between 1 to 1.5 million a year. And I was like, I want to be that. I want to do that. Why? Because I want 1 to 1.5 million a year. That's it. And in many ways, you're often taught to be like that. You're kind of conditioned to be like that. And which is
by who? By who do you think?
I think it's hard to say by society. I think that's pretty lame, but like just a general expectation that for you to be successful, you need to be making lots of money. Because houses cost money, nice cars cost money, smashed avo and kind of toast cost money. And so with more money, you just think, it brings more happiness. And I used to have this saying with my friends a really long time ago. We were having this conversation and they were saying, well, Tim, the old adage, you can't buy happiness with money. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But it's a lot more comfortable crying a Mercedes than it is on a bike. And so, you're just an idiot, when you're young.
But what changed? Why does it change? Why did that?
It changed because I found something. When you find something that you actually like to do, something inside you changes. And I think that comes partly with age, but it also comes, I think, with just finding the thing. And so I never felt that passion in the law. I think I was okay at it, and I had a good career path in front of me to be partner, but I was never really passionate about it. And so when the opportunity came to kind of join the family business, and my family business was in textiles. So we did sportswear for major brands like Adidas and Lorna Jane and people like that. And my mum asked if I wanted to join the business, and she started it 30 years ago. And I took the opportunity on. And I thought it would be a good opportunity to learn more about the business world and give me a break from the law. And I try and it was at that point that I think when walking into that office and working with my mum that I realized how arrogant I was as a person. But it didn't come until probably 1 year after I started working. Did
you have some preconceived ideas about what you thought you needed to do in a family business before even joining it?
I thought I was just better than the family business. And that comes partly from my parents always telling me that I was too good for the family business. And, parents like to pump their kids up and they always seem to underplay their own achievements and want better for their children. And for some reason, for a lot of families, like what's better for their children is always better than what you did as a person. And I can relate now that I'm a father, I can kind of relate. And they always thought I was better than the family business. And you go from these beautiful buildings, marble entranceways, beautiful views over Melbourne, and you walk into a small office with a factory in North Melbourne. And all of those material preconceptions you have about who you are and how good you are gets reinforced by the environment that you walk into. And so when I walked into WAG, which is the family business,
what's that? WAG is Washington?
Washington Australia Group. Well, it's called WAG Australia Group, which is really terrible.
Yeah.
I constantly tell my parents that was a terrible.
So Washington Australia Group, Australia Group.
Yeah. It's just awful, isn't it? Anyway, but I love it. It's just kind of like, it's also part of the charm. Like I just go, these are people who didn't spend days in startup accelerators learning how to pick a name.
Yep.
These are people who said, we want to do a business, we think we can be good at it, and we're going to go for it. And we just called it Washington Australia Group, WAG Australia Group, because that's what came to our heads. And there was no wank about it. You know, there was no fanfare about it. It wasn't about the name. It was about the business. And anyway, I think, look, obviously from a marketing perspective, online presence perspective, yes, of course, a good name is important. A good website address is important. All of those things, you know, you should spend time thinking about, but it's just the attitude to how people think about business that's changed so much. And yet still stayed the same. That's fascinating for me. But anyway, like I kind of walked into that room thinking that I was shit hosh, thinking that I'm going to teach these people something that they never thought before. I'm going to make them super professional, and I belittled them. I actually think, looking back, I belittled my future colleagues as well as my mum, and I feel actually quite awful about that. But it taught me a lot about how to treat people and how to work with colleagues. And
you say you belittled them, Tim, but at the same time, I remember you saying that there was the day that you came in terms of the dress code. And
yeah. So I think there was probably a bit of reciprocity there. I asked my mum what I should wear on my first day of work, and she said, "Oh, just something casual." And for me at that time, casual meant suit with no tie, because that's what I wore to Casual Fridays at Ashurst. So I walk into the office, and people are wearing like tracksuits and stuff, and they look at me and they just laughed at me. They like actually just laughed at me when I walked in, and I'm like, "I'm the boss's son. How dare you laugh at me?" And my mum was like, "No, you look great, sweetheart. You look fantastic," you know. And
bless her.
And it was like all open office, right? So it's just kind of like, and she started calling me, you know, these kind of baby names.
Oh no!
It was great. It was a great introduction. So while they made fun of me and ripped me a little bit, I didn't respect them, and I think those two things are. No respect is far worse. And so, but anyway, like after about a year of fighting with my mum, I started to, I don't know what clicked inside of me, but I just started to listen. And I started to not talk over her, and I started to question myself and my abilities. And it was very clear to me that I had no idea what I was doing. Very clear. I think I did add quite a bit to the business from a professionalism perspective in the end, but I think the way I approached it was really bad, and I knew nothing about business. I thought knowing about business meant reading the financial review, which I did, because that's what the law firm taught you. They said to be commercial, you have to read the financial review. You have to understand the business world. But actually, you really need to get your hands dirty. You need to, like, I don't think you've run a business until you're looking at a bank balance every day going, can I support my people? And not everyone needs that kind of stress, and not everybody has that kind of stress, but it is that level of care, like personal care, where your personal and business worlds merge, that really drive you to be better. Because you realize that it's not about you. It is about all the people in your business. You know, Jet Charge, which I'll kind of get into in a sec, there's 57 of us now, right? And directly or indirectly, they all rely on me as the CEO to make sure that them and their families are supported on a week-to-week basis, and that they can put food on the table. And that kind of, sometimes that pressure really drives people to the ground, and sometimes that elevates people and makes them strive to be better. And for the most part, that's been the latter, right, for me.
So Tim, you actually said, just to pull you up on a point, you sort of said, you knew not much about family business. My question really is, how much do you think you uncovered about what your mother was about by being part of the business?
Yeah.
How did your relationship sort of change?
Yeah, a lot changed. My parents and I had a really, I would say, quite a strained relationship when I walked into the business. And my mum suggested it when we were on a trip overseas, which my parents continues to say to this day is the worst trip that they've ever done with anybody ever in their lives, because I was such a dickhead. And mostly because I was missing my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife of many years. But it still sticks with me because every time we bring it up, they're like, "You were such a tool on that trip." And I'm like, yeah, I was. So what I learned about it was a very strained relationship. I was working extremely hard, extremely long hours at Ashurst. And I almost never saw my parents. And every time I spoke with them, it was like pretty perfunctory. And I try to see them once a week, but we were always fight, and we just never really knew each other anymore. And certainly in Chinese culture, family is extremely important. I'm an only child as well. And now being a father, I can see how much that would have hurt my parents. It would have been awful. So, but through working in the family business, two things changed. One, I saw my parents every day. And at the start, that was really difficult. But towards the end, it was great. We rebuilt a personal relationship, but that personal relationship was built on more than just blood. It was built on respect. And I really think that parents don't involve their kids enough in their careers, and the kids are naturally not interested. But I do think we actually probably have some obligation to involve kids in whatever you do. You don't have to run a business, right? But how many kids do you ask? And I'm not talking my 4-year-old. He knows I work at JetCharge, but he doesn't know what JetCharge really is. But to teach them what you do, because how many kids do you ask, what do your parents do? Like, I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know. I have no idea. And I think it'd be great if we did more of that. But my respect for my mum, in particular, increased. And I saw her as a business person. And I saw how strong she was in the face of just immense pressure and competition. I mean, I don't know how many of your listeners are in textiles, but anyone who's in textiles will know that the competitive landscape doesn't get worse than that. And so, yeah, it was pretty crazy. But by the end, when we finished up, my relationship with them had transformed into something that was a lot better. And for me, that will always be something I'm grateful for. And that continues to this day. My relationship with them, I haven't been in the family business for almost a decade, but that relationship with them has persisted. And it's just been awesome. So, it taught me a new part of my parents. And I think that's really only possible in family business. It was great. It was really good.
Do you think there's something as well about the migrant parent ethos that is so valuable in driving family business? I know there's obviously non-migrant family businesses which are powerful in and of themselves, but there is something that occurs. There's a little bit of, there's probably a few challenges as well, but there's a little bit of magic that occurs there.
I think, I don't necessarily want to put people into buckets, but certainly I can speak for ourselves, which is that you always feel like you have something to prove, and you feel like that you want to overcome adversity. And, when my mum was a single mum, we were growing up when I was growing up in Australia, we would work together, and, if the authorities found out that me as a 9-year-old was helping my mum sew clothes and cut zips and stuff, they'd probably come down on us. But that was just the reality. You had to do what you did to survive. I didn't have a tough childhood. I wasn't on the streets or anything like that, but you learnt the ethics of work and the importance of work very early on. I don't know if that's restricted to migrant kind of families, but I certainly do think that for a lot of migrant families who have to kind of fight to be at a level playing field, it just instills something in you.
This idea of learning to work at a very young age is something that I've heard repeatedly of successful people. So do you actually think you actually look upon that sort of time fondly?
Not when I was in primary school.
Clearly not.
I don't. I think I would have rather been reading comics. But certainly when I was in high school, it was made very clear to me that I had to start working. And I worked in year 9 and 10. I worked in the factory after school, packing T-shirts. And then in year 11, my parents said, you have to go out and get a job. Not because, I needed to, but just because that was the ethics of, I keep saying ethics of work, but it's not. It's just the importance of work.
Yeah.
And I got a job as a waiter in year 11. And it was so funny back then. Like, I just walked up to a place that was around the corner from the school. It was a recruitment kind of hospitality recruitment company. And I just walked through the front door and said, do you have any work? And they said, yeah, come through. Do you know how to set a table? I'm like, yeah. My parents taught me how to set a table. Cool. That's how you set a table. Sweet. Do you want your first gig on Saturday? Yeah. It was just...
That's surreal.
And it was actually at I do remember it was just around the corner from my house, and they had me serving alcohol. And I didn't have an responsible service of alcohol or anything. I was underage. It was just so bizarre. But I was pouring. They're like, do you know how to pour a glass of wine? I'm like, yeah. I learned how to do that at home. They're like, cool. This is how you do it. I'm like, sweet. So I was walking around in this party, this 11-year-old, when I was in year 11, pouring alcohol without a responsible service of alcohol license. Anyway, that recruitment company is no longer around. But yeah, I worked all through high school, all through uni, and I had some great jobs. And I was a waiter for 6 years. I learned so much about how to be good to people, how to treat, kind of like how to do customer service. You know how everyone says, everyone needs to go work at Macca's or something like that. I almost feel like there's a certain percentage of truth to that, that you need to learn to work. Not necessarily for the money, but that sense of achievement when you do get paid, and that sense of autonomy makes you want more. Just makes you want more. I remember working double time at the races as a waiter, and you get tipped and you get double time, and you go out with your kind of fellow colleagues and just spend it all on a big night out. And you go, man, I just spent all of my pay on a big night out, but it was worth it, and it was just cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So look, with thinking and finalizing the WAG situation, it seems interesting that at a young age you were put into a position or were in a position of making a decision or trying to influence the sale of that business. Not many people think about owning a business with the idea that eventually there will be an exit, right? So
yes.
Why did you sell? How did you go about that process? It's really interesting, I think, to listeners, because a lot maybe actually maybe in the subconscious, but not really in the forefront of their minds.
Yeah, I think for the second generation family business crowd, sometimes you do find your passion in your family business and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you bring some stuff to the family business that turns it into a business that you're passionate about. I tried to do that with WAG. I got us into more high performance clothing, from t-shirts and stuff like that. I got us clients like Lorna Jane and 2XU that I was much more excited about. It was just at the start of that active wear craze, right? And I really tried to bring my passion to it, but in the end, I couldn't. It wasn't something that I was super passionate about. And Chinese kind of factories, we had a couple of factories in China, and China was just getting way too expensive to manufacture. So we were forced to make a decision to relocate to another country. And it was at that point that I said to my parents, guys, I really don't want to move to Vietnam, Bangladesh, or Cambodia. Because unfortunately for textiles, it is a low wage chasing industry, and it's very hard to add value. So, and I just said to them, and they've been wanting to retire for ages. And I just said to them, I think it's time to go out on top. And I would say for anyone who's looking at kind of like starting something new or selling the existing business, don't wait until you're forced to do it. I mean, that's probably like number one, but every step of the way, if you're not enjoying it, you go, the best time to sell is obviously like when you're still making good profits. And so it was hard to sell the whole business, but we sold certain parts of it, sold some contracts and stuff like that. And that's how we went about it. But we made an active decision to do it. And we gave ourselves time to do it as well. And the main catalyst for it is because external environments meant a big step change in our operations, and one that I was not prepared to partake in. And so that kind of forced our hand a little bit. But by giving yourself some time to do it, it meant that we were able to find jobs for all of our colleagues, and they were free to go out to find other jobs, and we handled stuff as they left one by one.
What about jobs for yourself? I mean, did you actually set aside some planning around what you would do in the future?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, obviously, like I kind of went, well, what's after this? And I thought about going to work for one of our clients, so Adidas or 2XU. I thought about going to a whole new career. Like at that time, property was still very strong. And again, I was pushed a little bit by my parents to go, property, you can make a lot of money from property. And again, it was chasing money. And I actually had some meetings with some real estate agents that we were friends with, and said, maybe I'll become a real estate agent. And then I actually sat down and thought, well, what do I actually want to do? And we'd done pretty well out of the family business, and my wife and I had some savings. And I said, well, why don't we give something ourselves a shot? Like, why don't we start a business? And it was from that point that we decided that there was enough savings to kind of give me a go at doing something for a year. So we made a conscious decision to start our own business and to give it a go for a year. And if it didn't work out, we didn't have any kids at the time, it was fine. Well, I can always go back to the law, right? And that's the thing. The world always needs more lawyers. And so I always had that comfortable backstop. So this is not a sob story about, I would have been out on the street. No, absolutely not.
No.
I had a really good profession to fall back on, but that also gave me the confidence to take a risk. And so we decided to start JetCharge.
But pat yourself on the back, Tim. The reality of it is that even though you had something to fall back on, there is an unnerving decision that needs to be made, and you've made several of them. And there's something to be learned from you as to how you emotionally process these changes, because they are significant changes. You're moving from a family business, you're making the decision to sell it, but then not only that, you're actually going out and saying, I'm going to start something on my own in a completely different industry and starting a scratch. Like, it's just, for some people, it would be unheard of that they would even be able to want to attempt that. So what is it about you that allows you to do that repeatedly and not feel, well, you might have felt stress, but to do it anyway?
Part of it, and this is kind of going to be unfortunate for a lot of people who want to do it, but I had some level of financial security. So that's always important.
Yes.
But also I have this attitude that everything can be learnt. I have this attitude that there is nothing in the world that you can't learn. And so going into a new industry was, a bit scary, but at the same time, I just started reading everything I could about electric vehicles, about electric vehicle charging. I knew every single specification for every single electric car that was on the market. And when we first started the business, we did it with an electrician friend of a friend. His name's Jay. And he's the actual Jay in JetCharge, and we started it with Jay. And it's really funny, actually, looking back now. We called our family business WAG Australia Group, and we called our electric car business JetCharge, and Jet is Jay, Ellen, Tim, the three people who started it. So I never thought about it actually, that was the first time I thought about it like that.
Yeah, well,
it's interesting.
But you didn't do Jet, so...
No, I didn't do Jet.
But, it's interesting that you've got this 1 year probationary period almost you've set yourself to give it a go, right? Yeah, and so when you think about people that commence a new business, they're often commencing the new business with an exit in mind. And there's this irksome sort of tension that occurs between thinking, I'm so passionate about this business, yet I'm actually having to think about the fact that there will be an exit at some point in time. How do you actually deal with that tension? And
No, I actually didn't have an exit, which got me into a lot of problems with the startup community, because I was pretty excited. I was going to join the startup community, and I started going to events and meet all these venture capital people and other startup owners. And when you go to these events, Joe, it's actually really surreal, because you got a bunch of people, mostly young, mostly male, and you kind of walk in there and everyone is talking about exits. It's so bizarre. And they talk about, your elevator pitch and how you're going to convince someone to invest $1 million in your business in 10 seconds. And I said to them, doesn't it strike you that if they've only got 10 seconds to listen to your idea, that they're probably not the right investors? And they're like, yeah, but Tim, they listen to hundreds of pitches a day, so you need to get the point across. I'm like, how can you get a complex business idea? Like, when we started electric vehicles, it was all about the convergence of energy and transport. It's a huge topic. Like, you can't cover it. But anyway, you had to come up with an elevator pitch. You had to have an exiting place. And I said, but what if I don't want an exit? And no one had an answer for that. Because, again, a lot of people were doing these businesses and startups.
It's about the money.
About the money. It is. It is about, as much as people want to change the world, you cannot change the world in 5 years. You just can't.
It's almost passionless.
It is. It's actually clinical, right? And a lot of people, but I don't think it's illegitimate.
No.
I don't think it's illegitimate.
No.
But I do think it's clinical. And what I mean by that is you set out deliberately to create a product that will be acquired, right? And it's okay to admit that, right? And I basically say, like, if you want to start a business to make money, it is okay to do that. Give yourself permission to do that, but don't pretend you're doing it for any other reason other than to do that. Does that make you morally inferior? No, I don't think so, because the world needs lots of people to make it go around. But focus on that. Don't focus on trying to change the world, because you're not trying to do that. It's like crypto, right? People invest in crypto and they come up with all kinds of justifications about the future of the finance system is going to be reliant on crypto. But 99.5% of people who invest in crypto want to make money fast. That's it. Right.
It also comes back to what you said earlier about, like, wanting to be doing something and building something that is exciting and that you have a passion for, because it has some meaning associated with it for you.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I didn't know what that meaning was. And I think it's a mistake to think that you will immediately find passion and meaning in everything that you do. You don't.
No.
It develops over time. And actually, passion develops with education. So when I started the business, I wasn't really that passionate about the environment. My wife was, and that's why we got into electric vehicle charging. I was passionate about technology, and I was passionate about, all the things that brings. But I wasn't that passionate about the environment. But you learn to be passionate because you start educating yourself on what we're facing as a race, right? As a people. And so that was really important to me. And I feel more passionate about this industry and about the change we're going through than I ever have. When I first started the business, I thought we were going to be a specialist electrical contracting business for people to install charging stations for people's expensive electric cars. It didn't come out with this grand plan to lead the country in infrastructure, right? But now that we're here, you go, wow, I actually care more about this than I ever have. And you just can't see yourself leaving that industry ever, because so much of your personal identity is tied up in it.
Yeah. So could you just give our listeners a very brief overview of what JetCharge does exactly? Just because it's probably remiss of me not to ask you earlier.
No, that's okay. So JetCharge is an end-to-end EV charging infrastructure provider. We're here to make sure that Australia can transition towards low emissions mobility by providing the charging stations that you need to charge them.
And so how do you actually separate the politics of climate change from the business vision, given the space that you operate in, and the fact that not everyone sees the world the same way, and it would be even the staff that might not see the world the way that you see it. So how do you deal with that conflict?
I dealt with it by not talking about it. That was like my first strategy. Electric vehicles, we're a bit lucky because electric vehicles tends to be quite bipartisan. Even though in Australia we don't really follow that philosophy, but globally they cross political lines. You have both conservative and progressive governments supporting electric vehicles.
Yes.
In the UK, for example, Boris Johnson is a conservative politician, but he is going hard on EVs. And in Australia, we're going to see more of that as well. In terms of the conflict, though, I think it's just understanding that people do things for different reasons, and that it's okay for them to do things for different reasons. And that just because they're not passionate about the environment doesn't mean they're not a good person, and doesn't mean they don't have something to contribute. My hope is that eventually, through silent manipulation, everybody will be concerned about the environment, but that's probably a fair way off. But, at Jet Charge, we have people who join us for lots of different reasons, most of them not because of the environment. Some just want to do cool things with technology. Some want to build, like our head of infrastructure services, Peter, he just wants to train the next generation of electricians to be globally leading. Right? He's really passionate about the electrical industry. You've never spoken to someone who can talk for hours about a switchboard, right? You kind of...
That's exactly who you want in charge of that, right?
That's right.
It's perfect.
That's right. But he's like super passionate about safety. He's super passionate about fit for purpose electrical. Like you just go, people just do things for different reasons.
That's true.
And that's how you separate it. And again, it's about permission, Joe. It's about permission for people to be different.
Yeah.
But importantly, you need to gel it all together with a single culture and a single underlying resolve. Because I think regardless of why people do what they do, you need to make sure that they're doing it consistently under the one banner and under the one culture. That's something that we try and strive for at Jet Charge.
So you've talked about the fact that your family is not just your blood family, right?
Yes.
How do you as a leader ensure that your family culture sort of permeates through the business, and what are the benefits of that? The learnings that you had from, WAG into Jet Charge.
So what's really interesting, I think I thank my family business background for my philosophy when it comes to Jet Charge. Having a startup with no exert is just a company, right? But it's also extremely rare these days. And I think I set out to create Jet Charge with Ellen, my wife, as a legacy business. And what we mean by legacy business is there is no end game. Like we talk about who we want to be in 2040, who we want to be in 2050, well past my retirement, hopefully, and that doesn't happen all the time. But I think when you come from a family business background, that's how you think. And I think that permeates through the staff as well. When they think you've got one eye on the door, right? When you think they can sense that. But if they basically say, wow, Tim's like committed to this all the way, it gives them confidence to be committed as well. And I genuinely treat Jet Charge in many ways like a family business. And the thing that really gets impressed upon me about family businesses is that you treat people differently, and that it's not just about financial rewards, although that's obviously important. It's about inclusion. There is no executive team and everybody else. It's just everybody, right?
Are there practical things that you implement from a process point of view that actually deliberately informs culture?
Absolutely. So we as a business, we were in a very fortunate position to come up with our own values. And it's not something that's done by a lot of family businesses, because this whole kind of trend of having values and mission and all of that stuff, I don't know, like there's a big thing about it these days, but it wasn't always done. WAG Australia had no values, no mission, like it was nothing about that. But I sat down, and we were about 20 people, 25 people at the time. And we sat down, and over the course of several months, we decided who we were going to be as a company. That was just awesome. That sense of inclusion where everybody's voice matters. My voice was just one of them. And we sent out survey after survey, meeting after meeting, talking about who we were and who we wanted to be. I think everybody needs to do that in a business, no matter how small you are, just to learn what your people are thinking, because they're not always going to tell you everything, right? Without a deliberate without deliberate permission to do so. Other things are like, we have a very flat structure that's not going to be scalable, but I want to keep it as long as possible. We also, for example, have no commissions, no incentives, nothing. And that's because I don't want to give anyone any reason to not be a team player. There is no bonus for being individually like to hoard contacts or information or knowledge. Your reward for performing really well as an individual is better career progression, right? And you will get noticed by people, and obviously those people kind of, you know who they are. But at the same time, there's no financial incentive to screw over your colleagues. And I want to keep that for as long as possible. We've definitely lost kind of key hires because we don't have like bonus structures and stuff like that. But I am willing to make those sacrifices for culture. Because culture
you can't be everything to everybody.
That's right. That's right. People like, someone said to me the other day, it's really funny. This guy actually decided to join us in the end, I think. But he said to me, oh, Tim, just in terms of your KPIs, it seems like you have no incentives, no commissions. And from a stick and carrot approach, it seems like all stick and no carrot. And I said to, this is a business development guy. And I said to him, I was like, it really concerns me that you think doing your job is a stick. I was just like, I said to him quite frankly, like, the reason we don't pay commissions and incentives is not because we're trying to screw you over. We give you a higher base wage as a result. But I don't believe in giving you incentives when I don't give my accountants incentives. Like, why should they also work really hard? You know, why should they not be paid a bonus for doing their jobs well? You know, and I think it's just that we have to get people out of that mentality that it's all about personal glory and think about it more as a team. And yeah, people do that through team incentives and bonus structures that are completely opaque. For me, it's very simple. It's essentially everybody works together as a team. There's no financial incentive not to do so. That's it.
So we know, and you know, it's a bit of a cheeky name, the podcast, It's Never About Money. We know that financial security is important. I'm a financial planner, for God's sake. Yes. You know, like, I mean, it's important. But what do you think, and what do you hear when you hear a podcast name saying it's never about money and it's run by a financial planner?
What do I think? Yeah. I think it's pretty clever. But I also think that it's reinforcing a really important message that I'm sure you hear over and over again, and that your listeners would hear over and over again, which is that money is merely a byproduct of success, right? And I never believed that. Never believed that. I was like, nah, money is about money, and that's about it. But what I have learned is that the more you chase money, and the less you focus on your core competencies and products and services that will make you that money, but the more you chase margin, the more you lower your costs because you want to win work, the less successful you are. And the reason it's never about money is because success comes in all forms, and we must separate success from money. And which is why I think your podcast is right, is that I'm sure you do financial planning not just for billionaires, right? Financial planning and advisory is somewhat practical, but I think it's all about, for me, if you have a definition of success that is basically a 9-to-5 job that's secure, but you get to spend most of the time with family and friends, and that's your idea of success, then go to someone like you to make sure the finances are sorted, but enjoy that success. For me, I think, yes, JetCharge will be a really large business, and yes, it will be financially successful, but it's because we have an ambition to transition Australia to low emissions vehicles, right? We have an ambition to be important in that transition. And for whether it be for ego, whether it be for whatever, I want to look at charging stations on highways and say, I installed the first one of those, right? And to feel relevant. We're all looking for relevance, and to feel relevant, and that's my definition of success. And if you make money out of that, awesome. Of course, I want to make money out of that. Of course, everybody does, right? But it's money can only ever be a consequence. It can't be the main goal.
And I think you set yourself up to a greater degree to actually be financially successful when you look at it that way, when you set it up that way.
You have to, and I think it's really hard to do that, Joe, in a job that you don't feel any kind of passion for.
Yeah.
And people who listen to this podcast, people who are in jobs that, whether it be their own business or just a normal job, right? They know when they're doing something they like. You just know in your heart that you're doing something you like because you don't have problems getting out of bed in the morning, right? there are lots of people who go, a job is a job and that's it. And there are lots of people who are in an unfortunate position, most people in an unfortunate position where they have to work for work's sake because they have to put food on the table. But if you have the opportunity to change that, just pause. I believe just pause and go, what do you actually like? And everybody likes something. Everybody likes something. And what I say to people I mentor, for example, at unis and stuff, if you don't know what you like, think about what makes you angry and what makes you really upset and things that you hate, and go the opposite of that. Because hate and love are both passions. And it's very hard for people to be positive and go, oh, I love this. I love baking. I love whatever, right? But people always have something they hate, right? And if you're able to harness that and look at the opposite of that, well, you've probably found your passion for that as well. So if you have the opportunity, just pause and pursue that. In my mind, if you have the financial security to chase something that you love for a year, just do it, because you owe it to yourself to do that once in your life.
So what keeps future Tims getting up in the morning and, getting up to work, and, what's still to do?
So much to do. The looming change, just to talk about electric vehicles for 1 second, is that electric vehicles currently make up 0.75% of new vehicle sales. Nothing. We sell about 1 million cars a year in Australia, right? That is forecast to grow to over 50% by 2030. So in the next 8.5 years, the market is going to grow by more than 50 times. And so where we are, I've been doing this for almost a decade, where we are today is absolutely inconsequential compared to what's to come. And so therefore, there is a lot to come. The reason I get out of bed in the morning is because I am deeply passionate about Australia creating some kind of industry out of this transition. Most of the things that we're doing as part of the electric vehicle world is purchasing cars made overseas, installing charging stations made overseas, using software that's made overseas, right? We are consumers of this transition. We are not the creators of the transition, nor do we benefit from the transition. We have a lot of lithium that gets used in batteries. We dig that shit out of the ground and we ship it overseas for someone else to make money from and to create intellectual property from. One of the reasons why I chair the main lobby group and business group in Australia called the Electric Vehicle Council is because I'm deeply passionate that Australia needs to be ambitious about its industry and its role in the world when it comes to EV transition. That's what's ahead of us, is the creation of a new industry in Australia, and I'm deeply, deeply passionate about that. And that's what gets me excited. The ability to train and create things for a whole new generation, something that Australia can be proud of, not just raw minerals, not just importing education, but actually exporting things that we create to the world and taking advantage of it. That's what's ahead of us.
Wow, Tim, a lot of people talk about their passion. I'm not joking when I say, hearing you speak, we're on Zoom and some of this is lost in translation, but I'll tell you what, I had goosebumps listening to that because I feel the passion. And I now, in having now listened to your first conversation at the Family Business Australia group, and now again, I think anyone who listens to this understands that when you have passion, your business can be successful because it makes a big difference. And I'm a lay person when it comes to this, and yet, you got me excited. So
that's good.
Yeah, great. What does actually, so this is about leaving a legacy.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
This is really about leaving a legacy.
Yeah, it is. And I don't know if it's a product of my generation, Joe, but people say, are you doing this for your kids and stuff? And I'm like, yeah, maybe part of it, but I'm also doing it for me, and I'm doing it for my wife, and I'm doing it kind of for all of my colleagues. And it is about leaving a legacy that you can be proud of. You know how people talk about making the world a better place and all of that stuff, and it just sounds so corny. Like
when Michael Jackson sang. No, what was it? Yeah, I can't remember what it was called, the big collab that they did. Anyway, yeah.
But you just go, okay, well, that sounds stupid. But actually, if you think about it, one of the things that Blake Dawson Waldron or Ashurst, where I worked, one of their values was stewardship.
Yes.
I always really loved that value. And stewardship merely means trying to make it a bit better than when you joined, right? And it doesn't have to change the world. It just has to move it forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, the legacy that we're going to create. And you feel like you've made a difference. And in our short lives, you know, you kind of go, that's something to be proud of. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
Last question, not the most serious question, but
Sure.
What spirit animal would you be, Tim?
Oh God, I don't know. That's a really
terrible question.
That's not a terrible question. It's just it's a really hard question, because the first thing that comes to mind is you want to be the attack animals because you think of yourselves as leading the pack. But I guess for me, it's actually more about being the grind. Like, I actually feel like it's about making progress one step at a time. And you don't want to be a turtle, do you? Like, nobody wants to be a turtle.
A bit slow when your name is Jet. Might not be. Maybe it's the fastest turtle in the world.
Fastest turtle in the world. Yeah. So I can't answer that, because I think these things get me tangled up, Joe, because I think way too hard about what kind of animal I want to be. But I think the principle is that everybody wants to be the rabbit, and everybody wants to be the jaguar or the tiger. The reality is that success doesn't come from being a rabbit. Success comes from being someone who plods along and celebrates every single step. And so I'm okay to say I'd much rather be a turtle and to kind of plod along and to make it to the end. But you just keep making it, and you just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Yeah.
Well, Tim, thank you. That's our time, unfortunately for me. When we set up this pod, there's a whole bunch of teasers that we need to create, usually a couple of teasers here and there. I feel like I need to make about 20.
No, not at all.
So it was really great. I think anyone who's in family business, who's considering exiting, considering entering, thinking about it just generally, would get a lot out of this. And so, again, very grateful to you for coming on.
Thanks, Joe. Appreciate it.
I hope that this one was enjoyable to listen to and there were some moments of value. If you have resonated in any way with the sentiments of this podcast, we would be delighted to direct you to our website, www.itsneveraboutmoney.com.au, for more free resources and education aimed at improving your capacity to make sound financial decisions for the benefit of your family. We wish you every success, however you define it.